In this video, we're going to take a look at transformations of rational functions. So first, let's just take a close-up look at the rational parent function. So we have f of x equals 1 over x. That has a vertical asymptote at x equals 0, and it has a horizontal asymptote at y equals 0. Notice also that the branches of the graph are drawn in the first and the third quadrant. So when you have a positive function, that's where those branches are going to be. Now let's look at the transformation rules. Okay, so in general form, we have f of x equals, and we have a at the top. So remember, a vertically stretches or shrinks our graph, and if a is negative, the graph will reflect over the x-axis. So in this case, that means if a is negative, our graph will be in the second and the fourth quadrant. So we'll see some examples of that down below. And notice your vertical asymptote is automatically going to be at x equals h, and your horizontal asymptote will be at y equals the k value. So remember, the h makes your graph shift left if it's negative and right if it's positive. And the k value makes your graph shift up if it's positive and down if it's negative. All right, so let's take a look at some examples. So number one, we have f of x equals 1 over x minus 3. So I want to keep my colors consistent. So in green, let's pick out the h. So this graph is going right 3. So we want to say if this graph goes to the right 3, then our vertical asymptote is going to be at x equals 3, because it's shifting that parent function to the right. So let's graph our vertical asymptote at x equals 3. All right, the horizontal asymptote goes with the k value. So in this case, there's no value back there in the back. So the horizontal asymptote is just at y equals 0. So if there's no number for k, you just still put 0. And then we can sketch the branches of our graph because we know that a is a positive value. We can graph our branches in the first quadrant. Just make sure not to cross over the asymptotes. And in the third quadrant. And that's a really quick way to pick everything out and graph without even having to type it into Desmos. So I'm just going to move my writing down here into the blank. So it went right 3. And that's it for that one. Let's look at number 2. So number 2, the negative 4, this is in my grouping symbol. So it's making my graph shift right 4, which is going to make my vertical asymptote shift right to where x equals 4. So let's graph a vertical asymptote at x equals 4. And then the k value is 2, so that makes my graph shift up 2, which is going to make the horizontal asymptote go to y equals 2. It shifts up as well. So that horizontal asymptote normally is at 0, but now it shifted up 2. And then we see that the a is just positive 1, so our branches need to go in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant. So just don't cross over those asymptotes. All right, moving right along to number 3. So I see we have x plus 3 in the grouping symbol. It's underneath that fraction bar, so that's why it's under the grouping symbol. So plus 3 means it's going to go left 3. So that means my vertical asymptote will be x, not y. X equals, and left 3 means it's at negative 3. So we have a vertical asymptote at negative 3. Then the horizontal asymptote goes with that k value of negative 4. So that negative 4 makes my graph shift down 4. So my horizontal asymptote would normally be at y equals 0, but it went down 4. So it's going to be at y equals negative 4. So let's count down. 1, 2, 3. It's down at negative 4. All right, then we're going to graph the branches We see that there's a positive out front because there's no negative out front. So just draw your branches in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant, and just be careful not to cross over those asymptotes. Very important. All right, number 4. So I see we have a +3, so that makes the graph go left 3, and it'll make the vertical asymptote be at x equals -3 because that's left. So from 0, -3 would make it go to the left. And then a +1 makes my graph shift up 1, and it makes my horizontal asymptote also shift up 1. So it's now at y equals 1 instead of 0. So just sketch y equals 1. And then our branches, we have a 2 for the a value, so it does have a vertical stretch by a factor of 2, because that's our a, it's bigger than 1. But it is still positive, and it's really hard to tell a stretch on these graphs because they already kind of look stretched out. So let's just sketch it in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant again because it's positive, it hasn't reflected yet. And let's take a look at number 5. We got x -2. So this graph's going to shift right 2, which makes the vertical asymptote at x equals 2, because it was normally 0 for the parent function, but it went to the right 2 units. Then the k value of -1 makes the graph shift down 1. So y equals -1 for the horizontal. It's normally 0, but it shifted down 1. All right, and then we have an a value of -3. So remember, those are 2 different things. Negative and 3 have 2 different jobs. So this one's going to reflect over the x-axis because it's negative, and it also has a vertical stretch by a factor of 3. So write all of that good stuff out on your paper. So vertical stretch by a factor of 3. And remember, these are already kind of stretched looking, but the main thing is this reflects. And we do need to write that it has a vertical stretch, but it's hard to really graph it so it looks different. And that's it for number 5. Okay, the last example, number 6. We've got x +2, so that means this one goes to the left 2. So the vertical asymptote will be x equals -2. So -2, vertical asymptote, and then there's no number out back, so remember, just put a 0, because you do still have a horizontal asymptote. It's just at y equals 0. And sketch that. And then we have an a value of -1. So that's just going to make it reflect over the x-axis. So that means our branches are going to be in the second quadrant and the fourth quadrant. All right. So that's it for our examples on transformations of rational functions.